in order to sell 13 diesels to what Volvo has as a sales policy, we would have to sell one battery electric vehicle first before we're able to order or sell 13 diesel trucks.
Four states are set to implement new zero-emission truck sales requirements known as advanced clean trucks this year. Those states include Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Washington State. Stakeholders, they're trying to delay the start of the new regulation for a variety of reasons. So with me to discuss those reasons is Chuck Burr, president of New York-based Burr Truck, and Mark Stone, director of sales at Burr Truck. So thanks for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourselves and the company.
Well, Burr Truck and Trailer Sales has been in the New York marketplace since 1967. We're a third generation company started by my grandfather. We are the longest tenured Volvo truck dealer in the United States, and we employ roughly 40 employees here in the Binghamton, New York market.
All right. So for those that may not be in the know, as far as the details are concerned, can you give us a quick overview of exactly what advanced clean trucks in New York will do?
Absolutely. So the Advanced Clean Truck Rule in the state of New York applies for any new vehicle purchases. In order to sell 13 diesels to what Volvo has as a sales policy, we would have to sell one battery electric vehicle first before we're able to order or sell 13 diesel trucks.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm clear on this though. So technically, with the advanced clean trucks, the requirements per the regulation, the requirements are on the manufacturer side. So not so much the dealership or truck fleet. So that being said, it sounds like there's like a trickle down effect. So these requirements are for the manufacturers. And to be real quick on this, this starts for model year 2025, correct?
Model year 2026, because we're always one calendar year ahead. So calendar year
Okay.
2025 for model year 2026. That would be
With
correct.
okay, so but the rule will start next year then, right?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, and then that's supposed to be, I think, for tractor for class 7 to 8. I think it's what 7% of sales.
Correct.
There'll be 7% of sales, and again, that's at the manufacturer side. But it sounds like so. I mean, you are a truck sales, dealership. It sounds like that's having a trickle down effect. So although this rule does not per the language, it's not supposed to put a requirement on you. It sounds like it does. So can you kind of tell me how the requirements on the manufacturer side is affecting your truck sales business?
Absolutely. So the zero emission vehicle credits are always owned by the manufacturer themselves. Okay. In California today, in class 7 or 8, so if you peel back the onion, if you will, for lack of a better term,
Sure.
the class 2B through class 8s have been lumped together as a total number to look very good on paper. But if you break that down, and we have the data to prove that, it's less than 1.8% of the total sales in California today. So class 7 and 8 are staggering behind, and you cannot buy class 6 down to 2B credits for 7 and 8 vehicles, ZEV credits.
Okay, so yeah, and that's where it kind of got a little confusing for me because that's when we really get into the nuance here. But I think that's kind of where the the devils are in the details here. So the way it works is, and correct me at any time I'm wrong here, because I'm a little shaky on some of this, but in order to hit that, again, this a certain percentage of sales, in order to hit that, they can have these things, as you mentioned, called credits, to where so it's broken down to is class 2B, and then like and 4 to 6, and then they can it's not like there's a 5% or 7% sales mark for class 6 specifically, or class 5 or whatever. You can sell any combination of those as long as the overall net is a 7% sales, and then you can get credits for in that. So kind of walk me through how these credits work, because I think that's where we're having the problem here as far as how it trickles down to your business. And so can you kind of explain like how, because the way I understand it is that you can borrow from other manufacturers. Is that correct? So if one manufacturer is doing way better than another manufacturer can kind of buy those credits. Is that kind of how that works?
In theory, I would say yes to your theory.
Sure.
However, in truck world, it's very different. So not every manufacturer has a class 4 through 8 offering, for example, right? So Volvo Trucks North America is a class 7 and 8 offering. They don't offer anything any of those lower ranges. So their percentage of sales has to hit that 7%. They can't buy those ZEV credits from the other manufacturers in the class 6 and below because they wouldn't be able to have enough credits to be able to get those in New York for class 7 and 8 vehicles.
And so therein lies the problem, and is the fact that that class 7 and 8 is pretty much exempt from those credits for all the other classes. Now, do you know exactly? Have you been told why that class 7 and 8 has that exception? And I mean, what's the logic behind that? Do you know?
We've asked that question multiple times and brought it up, and I brought it up to the CARB meeting a week ago, and I couldn't get a straight answer. No one can explain it.
Huh.
No one's ever been able to show us on paper how those zero emission vehicles credits or deficits actually work. It's all held by the manufacturers, and then the manufacturers say, I'm sorry, but this is the numbers that we have against us. And you have to deal with your lawmakers and your legislators and your attorneys to address the rest of it.
Okay, so you're just as confused as I am then on that 7 and 8 thing. So
Right.
that's good to know that we're working efficiently here on this. So kind of just go back a little bit on the class 7 to 8 sales. Again, 7% of the newer trucks. Uh, from what I understand, I don't think we're anywhere close to hitting that sales mark. So you've been selling electric trucks for a while. What's it looking like on your end as a percentage wise? Is it closer to 7%, or I'm hearing it as low as 1% or even a fraction of that?
So just like in our previous conversation a minute ago, is that even in California, when you peel back the onion, you look at the 2B through class 8, when you lump out the 7 and 8 registrations to total registrations, it's less than 1.8%, right? So we're not hitting the numbers in the class 7 or 8 space at all. We sold one battery electric vehicle last year, which gave us emission credits for 13 diesel trucks next year.
Okay, and so one thing I want to point out real quick is that Burr Truck, from what I understand, not against zero emission trucks. In fact, quite the opposite. You guys have been early adopters, maybe even pioneers of the technology in New York. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that you built the first level 3 fast charging station in Broome County, which you made available, publicly available, because we all know there's not much of a charging infrastructure. You've also been an authorized Volvo VNR electric dealership. So the point here is that you've invested heavily in zero emission truck technology, and you have a lot of experience with it. So what got you to jump on board early? And then the follow up to that is, why isn't everyone else?
Okay, sure. When I started working at Nikola Motors as the director of business development, I knew that CARB was coming down through these states. We knew we needed to hedge our bets immediately, knowing that we had to have the right infrastructure in place to be able to have it accommodating the total public, not only for our vehicles, but for the total public. So we invested heavily to the tune of about $250,000 in a level 3 DC fast charger. And we're the only one in the state today that you can actually park two trailers and charge two tractor trailer trucks with a level 3 DC fast charger in the whole state of New York.
Wow. Okay. And you've been selling electric trucks for a little while now. How much, if at all, has demand increased for these type of trucks?
There's zero demand for
Zero
these.
demand. Okay, that's about what I thought. Yeah. And so, as far, I mean, I'm sure there's been at least some interest as far as based on who you've been talking to. Who is buying these electric trucks, or at the very least, who's interested in these electric trucks?
Yeah, for sure. That's an easy question. So in the class 7 and 8, the problem is that we don't have the range. Number one, the
Right.
tractors are at a curb weight or anywhere from 8 to 10,000 pounds heavier than a current diesel is today. Where you really win in this strategy is in the class 4 through 6, where you're running 150, maybe 70 to 150 miles per day. Your quick delivery pickups for your restaurants and such, where it makes sense, where the weights aren't as heavy and the electricity is not as heavy of use.
So, all right. So, with that being said, there's probably obviously there's going to be more of a demand for the class 2B up to 6. Uh, do you think that you could probably hit close to the sales needed for those models as opposed, so set aside class 7 and 8, for example. Do you think it's feasible to hit it at least the class 2B and 3, for example? Are we there yet for that class?
We're getting closer to that. Yeah,
Okay.
we've asked for a seat at the table to help New York achieve these goals. We could actually help them achieve these goals much faster if we had a seat at the table, and we can get there in the class 2B through 6 class pretty much immediately within a 2-year time frame. That would involve building out infrastructure and doubling our capacity at our substations within the next 6 years to get there. But if we had a seat at the table to do that, we could definitely achieve these goals much faster than New York State is trying to do today.
Gotcha. So it's worth noting that advanced clean trucks, of course, comes from California. I know in Washington State, trucking companies have urged the state government to scrap advanced clean trucks, and their slogan is "Washington is not California," basically suggesting that the electric truck sales mandate, it may work in California, but not necessarily anywhere else, including New York, for example. So one argument here is that California, which is the world's fifth largest economy, which you can't set that aside because that's kind of an important detail there. And the reason why is because they have several financial incentive programs and then large investments in that charging infrastructure. Now, that being said, again, New York also is not California. That being said, does the state offer any incentive programs? And what is the charging infrastructure looking like in New York?
There is zero infrastructure on any of our throughways or highways to date today. Again, us being the only one in the state of New York where you can charge two
Right.
tractor trailers, right? And park two trailers today. So that tells you what the investments are in New York today. That's why we're saying that we need to pause this for 2 years. And I would like to say this also. As we're attacking new trucks today with 90% less NOx reduction than any current diesel, so it's pretty much water coming out of the exhaust today. There are zero mandates on these 99 to 2010 emissions trucks today. So while they say they're trying to clean the air, they're saying that we can go out and sell as many of those used trucks back out to the environment. All of these scrappages today for the New York truck voucher incentive program are for those older model trucks, but we're not attacking older trucks, we're attacking new truck sales. And that's our problem with it. So we're saying we want to clean the air, but we can sell as many as those dirty diesels, if you will, for lack of a better word, back out to the environment.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly add up, does it? So that's kind of the problem there. You did mention, okay, so let's talk about, you mentioned the 2-year delay. That's basically what we're asking for here. It starts next year. We're looking for 2027 target date. The first question I have about that is kind of a technical question here, which is, would that include keeping the same timeline or resetting the clock? So, for example, the current timeline requires, again, 7% of model year 2026, and then 15% by the time for 2027. If you were granted that 2-year delay, would the model year 2027 trucks have the 7% or the 15% zero emission? Does that make any sense?
No, it does. I think those are conversations that are open, right?
Okay.
And it kind of depends on what New York's investment's going to be back into putting that infrastructure in place. So I think we have to go back and ask New York the same question, right?
Sure.
We want a 2-year delay today, to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to be able to launch this effectively. Or we can concentrate in these class 4 through that 2B through 6 space and advance your numbers even further today. So I'd throw that back out at New York. We're open to either one.
Sure. So, with that being said, what do you expect to change in 2 years that will make those requirements, I guess you could say, more reasonable?
I think this would allow the state to come back and come up with a plan that's better for New York State, not good for California. There's no reason that any of these other states should sign on to the California Air Resources Board Advanced Clean Truck Rule without having the proper rollouts in advance to make that even achievable, without decimating an entire industry and dealers and manufacturers that are able to sell in these states because they're not going to be able to. So the manufacturers are now going to be forced to sell in the other 38 states.
Sure. And so the issue here is not necessarily with advanced clean trucks in general. I think it's more to do with the two things. Number one is the requirement for class 7 to 8. I think is the big pain point here. But also, it's like a just a carbon copy of the California regulations. I think the idea here is that it needs to be adjusted accordingly to whatever state is implementing this. Is that fair?
Absolutely, it's fair, and this is our question all along, is that in California, in order to get an amendment on anything related to CARB, you have to get California's permission first before you make any amendments in place. However, knowing that there's no technology in this Class 8 space for the municipal snowplow trucks, for example, because there's no electronic PTOs available in this technology today, DEC did allow discretion for 1 year. We fought that to get that discretion. However, we don't even know how that was even legal. So we're sitting here asking for a 2 year pause today. And then when I spoke to Catherine Garcia, number two, to Kathy Hochul, she didn't think a 2 year pause was legal. And my point was to her was, how do we even get the approval for the municipality snowplow discretion for 1 year? So if we can't do a 2 year pause, how can we do a 1 year discretion without California's approval?
Yeah, so it's kind of some hypocrisy here. So it sounds like the government can give itself its own delay, but when the private industry is asking for it, oh, we have a problem now all of a sudden, right? Uh, so here's a question and it kind of a doomsday scenario. But what happens if the state doesn't grant this delay? So if this happens next year, what are we looking at here?
Without an advanced clean fleet roll behind it and then be able to sell these older diesels back out to the environment, the capability of us is that we're going to lose $18 million annually in sales and about $4.5 million annually in parts and service. Um, so I think that for any dealer today, you're looking at a 1 to 5 year hold on to your seatbelt before it's the end for a lot of dealers, and we've seen that in California today, where a lot of dealers are going out of business.
Sure. And you just mentioned advanced clean fleets. And so, again, for those who are not familiar, that one is more of a requirement on the fleet side now. So, if I remember correctly, it's for larger fleets of 50 or more, or gross annual revenues of 50 million or more. So, talking about larger fleets. But to your point, though, that would require fleets to have a certain percentage. And so, it would basically force them to buy the trucks that you are being forced to sell. So, it would kind of be symbiotic. But without that, you're saying is like you're pretty much selling. the- I guess advanced clean fleets would artificially increase that demand. Without that artificial demand increase, you guys are pretty much screwed, right?
That's correct. I mean, we're all screwed. So if you think about that just for a second, you break that whole thing down. The scrappage on a class 8 to battery electric is 225,000 with the New York State Voucher Incentive Program. The tractor is still $525,000, so it's $110,000 cost X higher than a traditional diesel today. So then you take that plus the range deficiencies, it changes the whole operation of a regional tractor that usually runs between 5 and 650 miles, now down to about 150 miles. So then your cost X at product end is going to drastically increase as well. So everything you buy, every at the grocery store, anywhere is going to go up exponentially at what as well. So it's
Right.
gonna trickle down to everyone.
Right. Is that trickle down effect again? Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the issue here is like, it's again, it's a price thing. I think it's about up to like $400,000 for a class 7 or 8 electric tractor. We also have a range issue. So just economically is not feasible right now for class 7 or 8 trucks. But it sounds like we're trying to force those sales. But on from your point of view, from the sales level, that demand is not there. Um, and I think you said like what maybe 1%, maybe less than that. It's like how do we get to 7% sales? And by the way, 7%, that's the low end. It goes up to like what 40% by 2035.
Right.
What do we need to happen to reach those goals?
Easy. Have a seat at the table. Focus on the class 4 through 6 space where the range is there. The electricity grid can handle the day with level 2 charging. We could put more of these zero emission vehicles back on the road and put the mandates on the dirty trucks. Attack the dirty 99 through 2010 diesels first, and then bridge the gap between everyone together, so you stand as a united front, trying to create this great cause that they have in front of us where everybody is winning.
What do you think is the best way to move forward with zero emission trucks? In other words, do we just let the free market set the pace, or is some government intervention necessary? Like, what's the balance here, in your opinion?
I think the balance is between us, the people, and the government together, staying together to solve this problem as one unit.
And the problem here is it sounds like more of like a one-sided conversation
It's
happening here.
completely all one-sided conversation.
Now, from what I understand, the trucking associations of New York obviously is directly affected by this. I'm getting the sense that they have not had a seat at the table either. Is that your understanding as well?
They've had the same conversations with the same people that we have. None of us have a seat at the table.
So it's just a question. They're just not listening. Then that's the problem. Uh, I know that there are some lawmakers that are on your side now. From as far as you know, has there been any progress towards this push for this 2-year delay? I mean, what's the sense at the ground level over there?
There's a bill out there right now, I think it's 2290. Donald Lapardo, who is part of the Transportation Committee, and with bipartisan support, has over 20 signatures with a bill in front of Kathy Hochul, asking for a 2-year delay. The problem is too with the dealers is that legislators don't go back into session, I think, until sometime mid-January. And if that's the case and we don't get the pause before then, we're gonna lose over a half a year of production schedules.
Right. And that's, yeah, that's kind of like that lead time is pretty important, at least in this business, especially. Uh, so going back to the class 7 and 8 sales, I mean, so again, what was the number with how many electric trucks you would have to sell for to meet your diesel? I mean, was it like 1 to 13?
For Volvo trucks, it's 1 to 13, and some manufacturers are 1 to 10. So anywhere from 1 to 10 to 1 to 13 for this year, and then the following years it goes up even further.
Right. And so do you have to then just turn down orders? Like, I'm imagining that the situation that I can see happening here is that you're getting trucking companies who want to put in an X amount of orders for diesel trucks that you can't fulfill, not necessarily because you can't get that, or it is because you cannot get that supply because of this mandate. Is that right?
We've lost over 200 orders for next year.
200 orders. And so, yeah, that's a significant amount of revenue there. And again, I'm sure this has been attempted to be communicated to the state governments, but again, you got lawmakers on your side. But I mean, is there anything else that the industry can do to kind of, help push this issue forward?
I would say stop making this political and start using some common sense. That's
Yeah,
what it comes down to.
That's what we
yeah,
said all along, yeah, but it's not a they've made this political when it's not political. Just having a common sense approach to it, understanding where our grid technology is today. We haven't done any upgrades to our grid since World War II. So we gotta double the size of our grid. We have problems with the raw materials that are sourced in other countries and the processing from other countries, which we don't have that capability anymore. So coming up with that common sense approach, focusing on the dirty trucks, focusing on that 4 through 6 space, having a seat at the table. We would love the opportunity to help New York achieve those goals if we were able to have a seat at the table to help them achieve it.
yeah. And I just want to make sure I got this right. You are of the opinion that we're there or pretty close to there for up to class 6 vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And so this is all about basically the class 7 and 8. The class 7 and 8 trucks, they're throwing the wrench in this whole thing. Is that pretty accurate?
That's pretty accurate, and then you hear the other side of it, the congestion laws, and you have to dive into that in New York City, that, people in New York City don't want these big tractors there. Unfortunately, it sounds good in theory, however, when you quit having supplies show up at the drugstores and at the grocery stores and everywhere else people purchase things at, you have to have trucks come in there. So how about focusing on the dirty trucks and come up with a better plan with infrastructure, to help us get there?
Is there any concern about trucking companies, you know, taking their operations out of New York if this doesn't?
Absolutely. That's the talk of the day every day.
Is it? Okay, yeah, and I figured because I know New Jersey is actually having the same problem. Yeah, also, I believe they were supposed to set theirs next year. I think there's also a bill set, trying to stop that. But New York, there's other states around you guys that they're not doing it. And so I would imagine there's some concern about that those operations moving. And of course, that's going to affect you guys with the sales because if no one's just going to buy from you guys if you can't offer, as you mentioned, you lost 200 sales in diesel. I mean, I would imagine that other dealerships are pretty much experiencing the same thing, right?
Absolutely. We heard this first from our good friends in California. They've been going through it for the past year. And that's where we're talking about dealers shutting their doors down. Absolutely.
Okay, that's pretty much all the questions I have for you guys. I think the last thing I'll ask you is, where we go from here, and what are some things that I might have missed that you would like to add?
Anything else you want to add to that?
Boy, probably the only other thing that I can think of is, we experienced a real life scenario delivering the one electric truck that we did deliver and put into service. The customer location was a little over 150 miles away from us. So the truck couldn't necessarily get there on a single charge. So during the delivery, we stopped on the throughway to try and charge that truck about halfway. And the experience that we had was pulling into the rest area and finding that the charging station that was available in that rest area was located on the automotive side of the rest area, not on the truck side. Doing a little digging, we found out that New York State had recently spent about $400 million in infrastructure upgrades across the throughway, and not one rest area did they install a charging station on the truck side of the rest stop. So it just more proof that the state is, at least in upstate for sure, we are just not ready for these type of these requirements.
Additionally, I'd like to say too that the trucks are much heavier than a traditional diesel, as we discussed in a previously. Is that, and then you get a 2,000 pound heavy variant. So instead of 80,000 combination, you get 82,000. But can our bridges handle it? And these laws are intrastate, not interstate laws. So we get into these finite things here too that not everyone's looking at holistically as they try to launch this.
And so, just to recap, I think a good solution here is focus on up to Class 6, increase infrastructure investment, and then maybe we have something we can agree with. Does that sound good?
It sure does. And then well, I'd say this too, 80% of all your trucking in New York City alone is in your restaurant delivery vehicles, which is in
Right.
that class 4 through 6, right? We could solve this problem pretty quick.
Yeah, sounds pretty reasonable. Hopefully, that the voice of reason will reach, the state capital, and fingers crossed that you guys get that delay. Again, thank you guys for joining me, and I appreciate the conversation. And hopefully, I can follow up with you on future developments on this.
Thank you, Tyson.
Sounds good. Thank you.